There's a new player in the rapidly evolving landscape of artificial intelligence, a company called Hyperscale Nexus, and they're either buying or have already bought 30,000 of Nvidia's much coveted H100 GPUs worth about $1.1 billion. But there's one small problem. Hyperscale Nexus is run and owned by career criminals. The leadership at this company ranges from small-time penny stock pump and dumpers all the way up to one man suspected of being a money launderer for one of the world's most dangerous drug lords. What's up, guys? I'm Nobody Special, and if you like the CoreWeave story, then you are gonna love Hyperscale Nexus. And well, if you hated the CoreWeave story, then you're just gonna love to hate this story because this thing reads like a crime novel. It's got everything from loan sharks, money launderers, stock scams, shitcoins, famous works of art stolen, armed robbery, Chinese espionage, and even the leader of the biggest drug cartel in Europe. Now, some of you will almost certainly think some of this sounds just too crazy to be true, but Nobody Special brings receipts, and that's why for all you folks watching on YouTube, I've put links to all the news articles and SEC filings in the description down below, and for you guys watching on X, I've included those links in the thread below this video. That's right, folks, in our research, we found so much crime and scumbaggery that we had to attach a freaking bibliography to this video. So if you're curious or skeptical, feel free to fact check everything I'm about to tell you. It's all down there. The story begins on October 26th of last year with this article in PC Gamer. A GPU data center company agreed to buy a cannabis business last month in what could be described as a new joint venture. You see what they did there? Joint venture. In a move that may bring new meaning to the term cloud computing, Hyperscale Nexus Holding Corp., a business centered around providing Nvidia H100 GPUs for AI and HPC markets, entered into an agreement to acquire the Colorado-based American Cannabis Company, Inc. last month. The company describes itself as providing industry-specific advisory and consulting services, manufacture of cultivation products, and facilities for cannabis startups. Hyperscale Nexus, meanwhile, provides unparalleled cloud services, managed hosting, and professional services with their current stock of 30,000 leased Nvidia H100 chipsets, although quite what that's got to do with the acquisition of the American Cannabis Company remains hazy. Now, you can find all the details about this merger in this Schedule 14C that was filed with the SEC on September 5th, 2023. Now, there's one very important detail on page 8 of this SEC filing. Hyperscale is a Nevada corporation formed on July 3rd of 2023, whose business includes leveraging its acquisition agreement with xFusion Digital Technologies to provide Nvidia H100 GPU chipsets to existing Tier 3 internet data centers. Now, that's a very important detail there. Apparently, Hyperscale Nexus is not the company that's buying the 30,000 Nvidia H100 GPUs that are worth $1.1 billion. It's a company called xFusion Digital Technologies that's actually making the buy. Put a pin in that one, we'll be back. Now, you might be wondering to yourself, why would a data center company that's operating 30,000 Nvidia GPUs want to merge with a penny stock US weed farm?
The secret ingredient is crime.
Now, at first glance, American Cannabis Company might strike you as just another one of those penny stock US weed companies with a shady background. Now, the following is based on research performed by Kakashi on X, who's done a phenomenal job of documenting suspicious business dealings since the beginning of the AI Mania. And from Kakashi's research, we've learned that American Cannabis Company has a long and storied history of changing their mind about their core business. The company was originally founded in 2001 as a biotech named NatureWell Inc. and traded under the ticker symbol NAWLD. Now, in 2013, NatureWell Inc. merged with and began doing business as Brazil Interactive Media Company. They started trading under the ticker BIMI, and they ran a TV station in Brazil. And what does biotech have to do with an interactive TV station in Brazil?
Nothing!
Just a year later, in 2014, the company had yet another change of heart when they acquired American Cannabis Consulting Company and rebranded themselves as the American Cannabis Company and started trading under the ticker symbol AMMJ. And you might be asking, what does cannabis have to do with Brazilian TV?
Nothing!
Now, this is American Cannabis Company's current CEO. His name is Ellis Smith. And upon completion of the merger with Hyperscale Nexus, he's going to resign as CEO, but he will come out of the merger owning 13.2% of the combined company. Now, before I get into the leadership at Hyperscale Nexus, I have to take a minute to send a special thank you to an Anonymous MelonHead who played a vital role in investigating this company. This viewer saw the videos about CoreWeave and Nvidia's circular accounting and then took it upon themselves to investigate Hyperscale Nexus and then came to me with what they found. This person would continue to collaborate on this research over a span of several months. So be sure to show your appreciation for that Anonymous MelonHead by dropping a comment down below, also hitting that like button, and share this video with as many people as possible so that this story does not die in darkness. Now, based on our research, it appears that the key player at Hyperscale Nexus is this Norwegian man named Thomas Stray, who lives in Dubai. Now, this is that same Schedule 14C that we showed earlier that was filed with the SEC, and on page 7 here, you can see that after the closing of this deal, Thomas Stray will be the beneficial owner of about 9.5% of the company, along with a few other guys who we'll get to in a minute. Now, also noteworthy from that same SEC filing is this bit on page 13 that shows that the current ownership of Hyperscale Nexus Holding Corp is with something called the Titan Capital Irrevocable Trust, which controls almost 95% of the company. And then right above my head here in footnote number 2, it says the voting power and investment power of the common shares beneficially owned by the Titan Capital Irrevocable Trust are with Nina Stray, trustee. Now, I can only assume that Nina Stray is Thomas Stray's wife, maybe sister or daughter, but regardless, he's got the whole company in her name. Searches for Nina Stray came up blank, yielded virtually no results, but regardless, it's pretty clear here that Thomas Stray is calling the shots at Hyperscale Nexus. Now, Stray also runs a Dubai investing firm called Endamash Funds, and he likes to sell himself as an entrepreneur and investing guru, flaunting his wealth with a flamboyant lifestyle. He's also got a YouTube channel with 14,000 subscribers, even though he's got only one video and one comment on that video, which means that this guy has hired somebody to create an army of bots to make himself look like a successful business influencer. But the truth is, his name isn't even Thomas Stray. His real name is Thomas Oye. He's a convicted criminal. He changed his name to Stray after he got out of prison, and he's suspected of being a money launderer for organized crime in countries all over the world. Now, the following is based on excerpts from the nonfiction book Norsk Mafia by Ulla Martin Christensen, which, lucky for me, was translated into English in this master's thesis written by a woman named Catherine Warhus, who now works as a financial forensics officer at KPMG, one of the big 4 accounting firms. The story begins in the year 2000 with the dot-com bubble, where Thomas Oye had made a fortune, but like so many others, he lost it all when the bubble burst. To try to save his business, he borrowed money from loan sharks known locally as torpedoes, and when he couldn't pay them back, they owned his ass. It's at this point that it's believed Stray was forced into money laundering by organized crime in order to pay off his old debts, and that would ultimately find him arrested for being in possession of a briefcase full of 5 million kroner of stolen cash, which is about $500,000 US. Oye is also believed to have been the mastermind of plans to launder the proceeds from the infamous NOKAS Robbery. That's the largest cash heist in the history of Norway. They even made a movie about it. On April 4th, 2004, 13 masked men armed with fully automatic rifles and body armor attacked NOKAS cash handling in Stavanger, Norway. The well-organized crew used a burning truck to blockade police headquarters along with spike strips and tear gas to delay the police response. Although delayed by the tactics, police would eventually reach NOKAS, and in the ensuing shootout, Police Lieutenant Arne Sigve Klugland was shot and killed. The investigation and manhunt that followed the NOKAS robbery and the officer's murder were so extensive that the planners of the NOKAS robbery were said to have orchestrated the high-profile theft of Edvard Munch's iconic painting The Scream just to distract police from the NOKAS case. Thomas Oye, aka Thomas Stray, is believed to be the man who would launder the proceeds from the NOKAS robbery, although most of that money was never recovered. In 2005, Oye would be sentenced to just 6 months in jail for possession of stolen property, and after his sentence, when he got out of jail, he moved to Dubai and changed his name to Thomas Stray. According to the Norwegian website Capital, Stray Oye is still wanted for questioning by Norwegian police in 2 other ongoing money laundering cases. But Stray Oye swears that he's a reformed man and he's all legit now, even though in September of last year, right around the time this merger was announced, it was discovered that Thomas Stray is sharing an office with a guy named Daniel Kinahan. That's the same Daniel Kinahan as the guy from this wanted poster offering $5 million from the DEA for information leading to the arrest of Daniel Kinahan or the disruption of the Kinahan criminal organization. It turns out Stray's office roomie is an international drug lord. The Kinahan cartel is believed to be the largest organized crime ring in Ireland and among the largest in the world. Daniel Kinahan is one of the leaders of the cartel. Kinahan claims he's a legitimate businessman, although authorities say his boxing and MMA empire, MTK Global, was used to launder the proceeds from the cartel. MTK Global was the subject of much controversy in the boxing world. Despite gaining notoriety by managing heavyweight champion Tyson Fury, that wouldn't stop Daniel Kinahan's life of crime from spilling over into his boxing business with deadly consequences on February 5th, 2016.
Irish nationalists opposed to Northern Ireland's peace process have told broadcasters they were behind a fatal shooting at a Dublin hotel last week. One man was killed and 2 others were wounded when gunmen dressed as police officers opened fire at a boxing weigh-in. The Continuity IRA says it was in retaliation for the killing of an ally in 2012.
On February 5th, 2016, armed men dressed as police officers would storm the Regency Hotel during a pre-fight weigh-in for a boxing match, and in the ensuing chaos, Kinahan cartel member David Byrne was shot and killed, although it's believed that Daniel Kinahan was the intended target. The attack was part of an ongoing feud with the rival Hutch gang that would see at least 18 people killed in beatings, stabbings, shootings, arsons, and even bombings. Daniel Kinahan's boxing business, MTK Global, would be permanently shut down in April of 2022 after being sanctioned worldwide by the US government. The Kinahan cartel is said to be worth over $1 billion, money that's now being hunted by police all over the world, and thus that $1 billion is very likely looking for a new place to hide right now. Did I mention that the price tag for those 30,000 Nvidia GPUs that Hyperscale Nexus is trying to buy is roughly $1.1 billion? And did I mention that Daniel Kinahan just happened to share an office with Thomas Stray? The American cannabis company made just $2.4 million in profit off of $13.5 million in revenue in all of last year combined. And the current valuation of the Hyperscale Nexus holding company is just $100,000. These companies do not have $1.1 billion to buy these Nvidia GPUs, and they're not even close. But Thomas Stray Oye's office buddy, the international drug lord, he does have $1 billion, and with all the heat that's coming down on his organization now that it's been sanctioned worldwide by the US government, they have all the reason in the world to hand that money off to a money launderer like Stray. Now, compared to Norwegian cop killers and Irish drug lords, the rest of the leadership at Hyperscale Nexus is pretty vanilla, but they nonetheless still have a very impressive resume of pump and dumps, money laundering, and other assorted dirtbaggery. And in the interest of time, we're going to zip right through these, but again, it's all in the links down below if you want to know more. Tad Maylander is the lawyer for both Hyperscale Nexus and the American Cannabis Company, and after the merger, he's going to own 10.5% of the combined company. This guy has been involved to one extent or another in a handful of penny stocks that all trade like pump and dumps, including Cannabis Strategic Ventures, Marijuana Company of America, Cannabis Global Inc., and Plandai Biotechnology, where Maylander would take over as CEO after the prior CEO, who was also his client, was convicted of illegally selling Plandai stock and misleading the public. Timothy Machula will also own 9.5% of Hyperscale Nexus after the merger, and although I wasn't able to find a picture of this guy, I was able to dig up plenty of information on his background. In 2007, he was convicted of operating an unlicensed financial advisor firm that managed more than $7 million in client assets. He also became the CEO of a penny stock pump and dump called Spur Inc. when 3 executives at that company resigned after being charged with fraud. He was also head of investor relations at Plandai Biotech. Remember, that's the one where Tad Maylander took over with the illegal stock offering. Thomas Berg here will also own 9.5% of the company after the merger. Now, I was able to dig up very little information about Thomas Berg. He runs a company called the Grown Up Group that makes branded bags and backpacks in Hong Kong, and he recently started a firm called the Berg Development Group in Dubai. But as far as our research can tell, he's clean. Someone named Kristian Kvavkik will also own 9.5% of Hyperscale Nexus after the merger, but there's a problem because that name appears to not exist. I believe this person is actually Kristian Kvavkik Helgesen, a known associate of Thomas Oye, aka Thomas Stray. Helgesen was also previously convicted of fraud. He ran a pyramid scheme with Thomas Stray called the 5% Community, who apparently stole millions of dollars from the Hells Angels in Denmark. He also ran a scam where he issued and sold shares of a company called Lupium without authorization. George Sebastião will be the Chief Technology Officer at Hyperscale Nexus after the merger. Now, I don't know what George knows about artificial intelligence or data centers, but I do know that he knows an awful lot about a failed attempt to steal $500 million from the Central Bank of Angola. That's a scam that he and his co-conspirators almost got away with, were it not for a suspicious teller at an HSBC branch flagging an attempt to transfer the money out of the country. Sebastião also ran a shitcoin scam called Yemcoin. Oh, and on his LinkedIn page, Sebastião also claims to have previously been a chief technology officer at Huawei. I guess he snuck that in between pumping shitcoins and robbing Angola. So at this point, it's become painfully obvious that Hyperscale Nexus is either another in a long line of pump and dump scams, or even worse, a money laundering front for an international drug cartel. Now let's talk about the company that Hyperscale Nexus has engaged with to build out this massive new AI infrastructure, xFusion. Recall from the SEC filings that xFusion are the ones that are actually going to acquire the Nvidia H100 GPUs. But before we get into that, just a quick reminder, folks, that since September of 2022, it's been illegal for Nvidia to sell H100 GPUs to China. Those export controls were put in place to prevent this technology from being used by the Chinese military. So now that that's out of the way, let's check in with xFusion, the company that Hyperscale Nexus hired to acquire 30,000 H100 GPUs for them from Nvidia. Now, I realize some of this might sound crazy, but hear me out here, guys. I'm beginning to suspect that xFusion might actually be a Chinese company. Now, I know some of you are probably thinking this nobody guy is just a conspiracy theorist, but can we all agree that at the very least, we've ruled out the French? Still not convinced that xFusion is a Chinese company? Well, how about this one in Bloomberg from November of 2021? Huawei said to sell key server division due to US blacklisting. Huawei recently set up a subsidiary called xFusion in the provincial capital of Zhengzhou to grow businesses related to Kunpeng-based technologies, according to the People. There you have it, folks, in black and white. xFusion was created as a spin-off of Huawei for the sole purpose of evading US sanctions. That's the same Huawei that has a reputation for putting spyware in every single piece of equipment it touches around the world to help the Chinese Communist Party spy on everyone. This is the same xFusion that Hyperscale Nexus just hired to acquire 30,000 Nvidia H100 GPUs worth $1.1 billion. So if xFusion was really trying to buy 30,000 of these H100 GPUs from Nvidia, it would be illegal for Nvidia to sell them to xFusion because xFusion is a Chinese company and those export controls prevent it. So how could Nvidia be so blatantly violating US sanctions? Well, that's because xFusion isn't really the ones buying the chips from Nvidia. xFusion is using yet another third party to make the buy. And to find out who that is, we go to this Memorandum of Understanding that was filed with the SEC between Hyperscale Nexus and xFusion on August 25th of 2023. Shout out to Kakashi on X who found this one in the SEC archives. And here it is right on the first page of that MOU. The purpose of this MOU is to formalize the relationship and the terms, conditions, and processes for Hyperscale's purchase and xFusion's sale through its distributor, the Redington Group. And they go on to list all the many technologies that the Redington Group is going to help them to acquire. And right there at the bottom of that paragraph, they talk about 30,000 Nvidia H100 GPU chipsets eligible for Hyperscale's purchase on agreed terms. So once again, they're telling us in plain English here what they're doing. Hyperscale Nexus has hired xFusion to buy those H100 GPUs, but xFusion can't do that because they're a Chinese company, and so they're hiring another third party, the Redington Group, who's based in India, to make the buy direct from Nvidia. And this language here in the last paragraph on page 10 is important too. Prior to the commencement of manufacturing, xFusion requires a confirmed purchase order from Hyperscale Nexus Corp through their authorized distributor. Additionally, Hyperscale Nexus agrees to make the necessary down payment required by Nvidia and quarterly reporting of the demand in advance as per their requirements for each specific purchase order. All terms will be subject to approval by xFusion, the authorized distributor, Redington, and Nvidia. In other words, Nvidia has to approve on this sale, knowing that these chips are going through xFusion onto Hyperscale Nexus. And it looks like Nvidia didn't just approve this deal. Jensen Huang himself may have personally intervened on behalf of all parties of this agreement in order to get this deal done. Now remember, the Redington Group is based in India, and as it happens, 11 days after this MOU was signed, this happened.
On to business and tech news. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi met with Jensen Huang. Huang is the CEO of software firm Nvidia. They discussed India's potential in the field of artificial intelligence.
That's right, folks. There's Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang donning his most formal of motorcycle jackets to shake hands with the head of state of the most populous country in the world, just 11 days after a bunch of career criminals signed an MOU with a foreign adversary to buy $1 billion worth of his chips illegally, using India as a conduit to circumvent US sanctions. So this raises a few questions. First of all, did a large purchase order from the Redington Group for up to $1.1 billion worth of H100s show up in any of that magnificent data center revenue or forward guidance that Nvidia just reported? And if so, are we really meant to believe that Nvidia had no idea that these chips were being bought in violation of US sanctions by a Chinese company, especially when publicly available SEC filings can easily confirm where these chips are going? And of course, that says nothing of the fact that there's reasonable suspicion that the original source of the funds paying for these GPUs could be the criminal proceeds from an international drug cartel. So long story short, I see two distinct possibilities here. Number one, Hyperscale Nexus is just lying about everything. They're just another fake AI company that popped up in the AI Mania to try to separate suckers from their money. They don't really have $1 billion, they don't really have any GPUs, and this whole deal is just one massive securities fraud, in which case AMMJ stocks should go to zero and all the people involved should go to jail. Or scenario number two, the worst case scenario. American Cannabis Company is merging with Hyperscale Nexus, a shell company that appears to be the personal fiefdom of Thomas Stray, aka Thomas Oye, a man who went to prison for possessing stolen cash after he went bankrupt in the dot-com bubble and got mixed up with loan sharks and gangsters. That same Thomas Stray is suspected of laundering the proceeds of the infamous NOKAS robbery that killed a cop, and now he's suspected of being a money launderer for Daniel Kinahan, the ringleader of the notorious Kinahan drug cartel that just happens to be worth about $1 billion, and that $1 billion is likely looking for a new home since the Kinahans are being hunted by US law enforcement and everything they own directly gets slapped with a US sanction. All those guys are getting together with xFusion, the most Chinese company ever, which was spun off from Huawei for the sole purpose of evading US sanctions that are meant to prevent Nvidia GPUs from falling into the hands of the Chinese military. xFusion agreed to buy $1 billion worth of Nvidia GPUs, a number that bears a striking resemblance to the value of the Kinahan criminal empire, using an Indian distributor named Redington to make the deal look legal for Nvidia. Just a few days later, Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang visits India in his stupid jacket and shakes hands with the Prime Minister, ostensibly greasing the wheels to get this deal done. One of these two scenarios must be true here. Nvidia shareholders may want to consider asking their leadership team if any large purchase orders were recently received from the Redington Group, and if any of that was reported in revenue or forward guidance in any of these magnificent quarters. I can't even begin to fathom the potential fallout if scenario 2 turns out to be true, and we learn that levered up drug money is partially responsible for a multi-trillion-dollar stock bubble. It's all down there in the links below, folks. Every article and SEC filing, they're telling us exactly what they're doing in plain English, or Norwegian, or Mandarin. And to all you folks out there who say I'm crazy or a conspiracy nut or a rando, I have one question for you. How much? What was the number? What was the number that Nvidia stock reached where so many of you decided that it was no longer possible that any of this stuff could be true? How much money did it take for so many people to ignore what their eyes and their ears were telling them? Just because a stock is moving higher doesn't mean all the stuff in those links down below isn't happening. Till next time, live small and dream big.